In the heart of Savannah, two powerful families make a decision that will change everything. Lily Caldwell, a passionate artist, and Ethan Harrison, a man molded by duty and ice, are forced into a marriage neither of them wanted. At first, it's all bitterness, sharp words, cold silences, a cage built of legacy and pride. But then, something impossible begins to grow. Late-night conversations, stolen glances, laughter in the quiet, love that was never meant to exist. And just when their hearts start to hope, their families realize that this love is dangerous. Secrets are exposed, lies are spread, and the people who brought them together now want to tear them apart. Hate married them, but love will destroy them. Music swells softly, fading to a whisper. Are they strong enough to fight for each other? Or will duty win over their hearts? If you love stories of forbidden love, family drama, and hearts that refuse to break, hit that subscribe button now and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss a single chapter of Lily and Ethan's journey, because their love is worth fighting for. The crystal chandelier trembled above the Caldwell dining room as Lily's fork clattered against her plate. Her father's words hung in the air like smoke from a funeral pyre, suffocating every breath she tried to take. You will marry Ethan Harrison in 3 months. This is not a discussion. Richard Caldwell's voice was granite, cold, unyielding, final. Around the mahogany table, her mother sat with hands folded like a portrait of obedience, and her younger sister Emma stared down at her untouched roast, tears already pooling in her innocent eyes. Lily's world shattered in that moment, fracturing into 1,000 jagged pieces that cut deep into her soul. She was 26 years old, an artist whose paintings spoke of freedom and wild horizons, a woman who had spent her entire life dreaming of love that would set her ablaze with passion. And now, her father was selling her like livestock to the family they had spent decades quietly despising. The Harrisons. Just the name made her stomach turn. She remembered Ethan from charity galas and society functions. Tall, handsome in a cruel way, with eyes like winter frost that looked through people rather than at them. He was everything she hated. Entitled, cold, molded by privilege into something that barely resembled human warmth. "I won't do it," Lily whispered, her voice trembling with fury and fear. Her father's eyes snapped to her, dark and merciless. "You will. The contracts are signed. The announcement will be made next week. This marriage will unite our families and end decades of pointless rivalry. Your feelings are irrelevant, Lily. This is about legacy. This is about power. This is about everything our family has built." He stood from the table, his 6-foot frame casting a shadow that seemed to swallow all the light in the room. "You've always been selfish, always chasing those foolish paintings instead of understanding your duty. Well, your childhood is over. Welcome to reality." As her father walked away, his footsteps echoing like a judge's gavel, Lily felt something inside her die. Not her spirit that would take more than one night to kill, but her faith in the people who were supposed to love her unconditionally. Her mother finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "It won't be so bad, darling. The Harrisons are a good family. Ethan is. He'll provide for you." But Lily knew the truth her mother wouldn't say. "This isn't about your happiness, it's about theirs." She stood from the table and walked to the window, staring out at the Savannah night, at the Spanish moss hanging from ancient oaks like the ghosts of all the women who had been sacrificed before her on the altar of family pride. And somewhere across town, in a mansion just as gilded and just as cold, Ethan Harrison was receiving the same death sentence. Ethan stood in his father's study, a room that smelled of leather, cigars, and old money. Alexander Harrison sat behind his desk like a king on a throne, his silver hair perfectly combed, his suit immaculate even at 10 o'clock at night. "The Caldwell girl will make a suitable wife," his father said, not looking up from the contract he was reviewing. "Her family's connections in the arts and old Savannah society complement our political influence perfectly. The wedding will be the social event of the decade." "I don't love her. I don't even know her." Ethan's voice was controlled, measured, but inside, a storm raged. He was 30 years old, the heir to an empire built on generations of careful planning and ruthless ambition. He had been groomed since birth to take over the family business, to carry the Harrison name with honor and dignity. But he had also hoped, foolishly he now realized, that he might be allowed to choose his own wife, that perhaps love might factor into the equation. His father finally looked up, and Ethan saw something frightening in those gray eyes. Absolute certainty, devoid of mercy or doubt. "Love is a luxury we cannot afford," Alexander said, his words precisely chosen like a surgeon's scalpel. "Your grandfather built this family from nothing. Your mother and I have doubled our wealth and influence. And you, Ethan, will solidify our position as the most powerful family in Georgia. The Caldwells have been our rivals for too long. By joining our houses, we eliminate competition and create an unbreakable alliance. This is strategy. This is survival. And you will do your duty." He stood and walked to the window, his hands clasped behind his back. "Besides, what makes you think you're capable of love? You've spent your entire life avoiding emotion, keeping everyone at arm's length. You're perfect for an arranged marriage." The words cut deeper than Ethan wanted to admit. It was true, he had learned young that showing vulnerability was weakness, that emotions were tools others used against you. So he had become exactly what his father wanted. Cold, efficient, untouchable. But somewhere deep inside, buried beneath layers of armor and ice, a small part of him still dreamed of warmth, of someone who might see past the Harrison heir to the man underneath. That dream died tonight. "When do I meet her?" he asked, his voice empty. "Next week. We're hosting an engagement dinner. All of Savannah will be watching." Alexander turned back to his son, and for just a moment, something almost like regret flickered across his face. Almost. "Ethan, I know this isn't what you wanted, but life rarely gives us what we want. It gives us what we need. And what this family needs is this union. Don't disappoint me, son. I've invested too much in you to watch you fail now." Ethan left the study feeling like a prisoner walking to his own execution. In 7 days, he would meet the woman who would be his wife, his burden, his cage. Lily Caldwell. He had seen her before at various events, always painting in the corner or arguing with someone about art or politics. She was beautiful in an infuriating way, all fire and passion wrapped in expensive dresses that never quite tamed her wild spirit. He had thought her ridiculous, a spoiled girl playing at rebellion while living off her family's fortune. Now she would be his problem, his responsibility, his punishment for being born a Harrison. And God help them both. The Montgomery estate glittered like a jewel box under the Georgia stars, its gardens filled with Savannah's elite, all dressed in their finest, all whispering about the scandal that was about to become official. Lily stood on the terrace, gripping her champagne glass so hard she thought it might shatter. Her dress was emerald silk, chosen by her mother to complement her complexion and show proper respect to the Harrisons. She felt like a doll being displayed in a shop window, pretty and lifeless and for sale. "Are you Lily?" The voice came from behind her, deep and cold as winter rain. She turned and found herself face to face with Ethan Harrison for the first time as his intended bride. Up close, he was even more striking. Sharp jawline, dark hair perfectly styled, eyes the color of storm clouds. He looked at her the way someone might examine a piece of furniture they were being forced to buy, with detached assessment and barely concealed resentment. "Yes," she said, lifting her chin. "And you must be my future prison guard." His eyes narrowed slightly, the first crack in his perfect mask. "I assure you, the prison goes both ways. I didn't ask for this any more than you did." They stood in silence for a long moment, two strangers bound by chains they hadn't forged, studying each other like enemies before battle. Lily noticed the tension in his shoulders, the way his jaw clenched when he thought she wasn't looking. He was suffering too, she realized. Somehow that made it worse, knowing that even united in misery, they were still adversaries. "They expect us to dance," Ethan said finally, gesturing toward the ballroom where a quartet played something soft and romantic. "Might as well give them the performance they paid for." He offered his hand and she took it, feeling the coldness of his touch even through her gloves. They walked into the ballroom together, and the crowd parted like the Red Sea, all eyes following the heir and the artist as they took their place on the dance floor. The music swelled and Ethan pulled her close, one hand at her waist, the other holding hers with mechanical precision. "Smile," he whispered harshly. "Everyone's watching." "I hate you already," she whispered back, forcing her lips into something that might pass for happiness. "Good. That makes this easier." They moved across the floor in perfect synchronization, a beautiful lie that fooled everyone watching. But in that moment, pressed against him, feeling his heartbeat through his suit jacket, Lily made herself a promise. "He will not break me. No matter what happens, I will not let this marriage destroy who I am." Across the room, their fathers watched with satisfaction. The trap had been set. The cage was closing. And neither Lily nor Ethan knew that this dance was just the beginning of a war that would eventually become something far more dangerous than hate. Rain fell on Savannah the morning of the wedding, as if even the heavens wept for what was about to happen. Lily sat in her childhood bedroom for the last time, staring at her reflection in the mirror while her mother and sister fussed with her veil. The dress was a masterpiece of lace and silk, custom-made by a designer whose name she was supposed to be honored to wear. But all she felt was nausea. In 3 hours, she would walk down the aisle of St. John's Cathedral, speak vows she didn't mean, and sign her life away to a man who looked at her with all the warmth of a glacier. "You look beautiful," Emma said softly, squeezing her sister's hand. At 19, Emma still believed in fairy tales, still thought love conquered all. Lily wanted to protect that innocence, even as her own was being murdered. "Thank you, Em." She tried to smile, but her face felt frozen. Her mother stood back, examining her with the critical eye of a sculptor assessing a statue. "Perfect. Absolutely perfect. The Harrisons won't be able to find fault with anything. That's what matters," Lily thought bitterly. "Not whether I'm happy, but whether I'm perfect enough to meet their standards." At the Harrison estate, Ethan stood in his father's study, adjusting his cufflinks with mechanical precision. His groomsmen, college friends who knew better than to offer sympathy, stood around making small talk about business and politics, carefully avoiding the obvious. That Ethan looked like a man preparing for his own funeral. His best friend Marcus finally broke the silence. "It's not too late, you know? We could get you out of here. Plane to anywhere. Say the word." For a moment, Ethan imagined it. Disappearing, abandoning his name and his inheritance, choosing freedom over duty. But even as the fantasy formed, he knew it was impossible. He was a Harrison, and Harrisons didn't run. "No," Ethan said quietly. "This is what needs to happen." He looked at himself in the mirror, barely recognizing the man staring back. When had he become so hollow? When had duty replaced dreams? He couldn't remember anymore. His father entered the room, resplendent in his tuxedo, radiating patriarchal authority. "It's time, son. The cars are ready." As they walked out together, Alexander placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder, a rare gesture of physical contact. "Today you become a man. Today you put family above self. I'm proud of you, Ethan." But as Ethan climbed into the limousine, those words felt less like praise and more like a tombstone epitaph. "Here lies Ethan Harrison. He did his duty." The cathedral was packed with Savannah's finest, all dressed in their most expensive attire, all buzzing with gossip about the merger marriage. Lily walked down the aisle on her father's arm, each step feeling like she was descending deeper into a tomb. Ethan stood at the altar, watching her approach, and for the briefest moment, their eyes met. In that instant, she saw past his cold exterior to something raw and wounded underneath, and she knew he saw the same in her. Two prisoners recognizing each other through the bars. The ceremony was beautiful and empty, full of words about love and commitment that meant nothing to the two people speaking them. When the priest said, "You may kiss the bride," Ethan leaned forward and pressed his lips to hers. A kiss as cold and impersonal as a business handshake. And as the crowd erupted in applause, Lily and Ethan both thought the same thing. "This is how my life ends." They were wrong. It was only beginning. The Harrison estate loomed before Lily like something out of a Gothic novel. all white columns and dark windows, beautiful and intimidating in equal measure. As Ethan's Bentley pulled through the iron gates, she felt her stomach twist. This was her home now. This place that smelled of old money and older secrets, where every room probably held a portrait of some stern Harrison ancestor judging her for not being good enough. The staff stood in formation at the entrance, a dozen faces wearing identical expressions of polite neutrality. They had been briefed, she realized. They knew this marriage was a business arrangement, not a love match. "Mrs. Harrison," the head butler said, bowing slightly. "Welcome home." The title felt wrong in every way, like wearing someone else's skin. She wasn't Mrs. Harrison. She was Lily Caldwell, artist and dreamer, trapped in a cage with her name on it. Ethan walked past her without a word, handing his jacket to a waiting servant. "James will show you to your room," he said over his shoulder, not even looking at her. "Your room?" she asked, her voice sharp. "We're married. Don't we share a bedroom?" He finally turned, and his expression was carved from ice. "This marriage is for show, Lily. We'll appear together at functions and maintain the illusion in public. But in private, we live separate lives. Your room is in the East Wing. Mine is in the West. I suggest we keep as much distance between us as possible." Before she could respond, he was gone, disappearing up the grand staircase like a ghost fading into walls. Lily stood in the foyer, surrounded by strangers wearing servant uniforms, feeling more alone than she had ever felt in her life. "This way, ma'am," James said gently, his old eyes kind. At least someone in this mausoleum had a heart. He led her through endless hallways lined with paintings, generations of Harrisons staring down at her with disapproval, until they reached a set of double doors. "You're sweet, Mrs. Harrison. Your belongings arrived this morning. If you need anything, there's a call button by the bed." The room was beautiful. Canopy bed, antique furniture, windows overlooking the gardens, and absolutely soulless. It was a room designed for display, not for living. Lily walked to the window and stared out at the manicured lawns, at the fountain where stone cherubs poured water endlessly into nothing. This was her life now, beautiful and empty and endlessly repetitive. She thought about her studio at her parents' house, the smell of oil paints and turpentine, the canvases half-finished and full of life. "Can I request something?" she asked James, who still stood politely at the door. "Of course, ma'am. I need a studio, somewhere with good light, somewhere I can paint." The old butler's expression softened. "I know just the place, the conservatory on the second floor. It's been unused for years, but it has skylights and faces south. I'll have it cleaned and prepared for you." "Thank you," she whispered, and she meant it more than he could know. That night, Lily lay in her new bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of a house she didn't know. Somewhere in the West Wing, Ethan was probably in his own bed, staring at his own ceiling, feeling his own cage closing around him. They were two strangers living under the same roof, bound by law and family, but separated by a chasm of resentment and hurt. And as sleep finally came to claim her, Lily's last thought was this: "I wonder if it's possible to hate someone and pity them at the same time." Morning came with violence. Sunlight stabbing through curtains, birdsong that sounded like mockery. The smell of coffee from somewhere downstairs reminding Lily that life continued even when your world had ended. She dressed in jeans and a simple blouse, ignoring the designer dresses hanging in her closet like expensive corpses. If Ethan wanted a trophy wife, he was going to be disappointed. She was not going to play dress-up in her own prison. The dining room was as cold as the rest of the house, all marble and crystal and furniture that probably cost more than most people's homes. Ethan sat at the head of the table, reading the financial section of the newspaper, barely acknowledging her entrance. "Good morning," Lily said, her voice deliberately cheerful in a way she knew would irritate him. He glanced up briefly. "Morning." One word. That's all she was worth. Lily sat at the opposite end of the table, because of course they couldn't sit near each other like normal human beings, and a servant immediately appeared with coffee and breakfast options. "Just toast," she said, "and orange juice." As the servant retreated, Silence descended like fog. The only sound was Ethan turning pages of his newspaper, each rustle a small rejection. "So this is how it's going to be?" Lily finally asked, unable to take it anymore. "We just ignore each other? Pretend the other doesn't exist?" Ethan lowered his paper, his gray eyes meeting hers across the expanse of mahogany. "What did you expect? Romantic breakfasts? Morning conversation? We're not a couple, Lily. We're a business merger. The sooner you accept that, the easier this will be for both of us." His words were like slaps, each one stinging more than the last. "I didn't expect romance," she shot back, her temper flaring. "But I thought we might at least try to be civil. We're going to be living together for the rest of our lives, Ethan. We could at least attempt to make it bearable." "I am being civil," he said coldly. "Civil means polite distance. It means respecting boundaries. It means not pretending this marriage is something it's not." He folded his newspaper with sharp, angry movements. "My father forced me into this just like yours forced you. The difference is, I'm not going to make it worse by pretending we can be friends." "I don't want to be your friend," Lily hissed. "I want to be treated like a human being, not a piece of furniture you're annoyed at having to live with." They stared at each other across the table, two people who should have been strangers but were now bound together in the most intimate way possible. And the hate between them was almost a living thing, pulsing and hot and destructive. Ethan stood abruptly, throwing his napkin onto his plate. "I have meetings all day. Don't wait up." He walked toward the door, then paused, his back to her. "And Lily, your studio is ready. James prepared the conservatory like you asked. At least you'll have somewhere to hide from me." Then he was gone, and Lily sat alone in that vast dining room, surrounded by wealth and emptiness, and let herself cry. Not because she wanted his love, she didn't, but because she had hoped, foolishly, that maybe they could find some small kindness in this disaster. That hope died with breakfast. The war between them had officially begun. The conservatory took Lily's breath away. Tucked on the second floor, it was a room made almost entirely of glass. Skylights above, floor-to-ceiling windows on three sides, all looking out over the estate's sprawling gardens. Morning light poured in like liquid gold, illuminating dust motes that danced in the air like tiny spirits. The staff had already moved in her easels, her paints, her brushes, all the tools of her trade that made her feel human. This, at least, was hers. She spent that first day setting up her space, organizing her supplies with ritualistic care, trying to create order in a life that had become chaos. As she worked, she tried not to think about Ethan, about the coldness in his eyes at breakfast, about the way he looked at her like she was a problem to be managed rather than a person to be known. But the harder she tried not to think about him, the more he invaded her thoughts. She wondered where he was right now, what meetings he was attending, whether he was thinking about her at all. Probably not. Ethan Harrison seemed like a man who had perfected the art of compartmentalization. Business in one box, family obligations in another, emotions locked away where they couldn't cause damage. Around noon, a soft knock interrupted her painting. She turned to find James standing in the doorway, carrying a tray. "I thought you might be hungry, Mrs. Harrison. You barely touched your breakfast." The kindness in his voice almost broke her. "Thank you, James. You didn't have to do that." He set the tray on a small table by the window, soup, bread, fruit, tea. "I've worked for the Harrison family for 40 years, he said quietly. "I've seen 3 generations grow up in this house. And I've never seen Mr. Ethan as unhappy as he is right now." Lily looked at the old butler, surprised by his candor. "He hates me." "No, ma'am. He hates the situation. There's a difference." James moved toward the door, then paused. "Mr. Ethan is not a bad man, Mrs. Harrison. But he's been raised to believe that emotions are weakness, that vulnerability is dangerous. His father made him that way. Don't mistake his walls for who he really is." Before Lily could respond, he was gone, leaving her alone with her thoughts and her soup. She ate mechanically, staring out at the gardens, thinking about Ethan as a child, being molded and shaped by a father who valued power over love. It didn't excuse his coldness. but it explained it. And somehow, that small glimpse of understanding made the hate in her chest feel a little less absolute. She returned to her painting, losing herself in the stroke of brush against canvas, in the colors that bloomed and mixed and created something new. She was working on a piece she'd started weeks ago, before the wedding. A woman standing at the edge of a cliff, looking down at an ocean that could either drown her or set her free, felt prophetic now. As the afternoon faded into evening, Lily heard footsteps in the hallway. Her heart quickened inexplicably. She knew those footsteps. Ethan appeared in the doorway, still wearing his suit from his meetings. His tie loosened, exhaustion written across his face. For a moment, they just looked at each other. "Your studio," he finally said. "Do you like it?" "It's perfect. Thank you." He nodded once, then turned to leave. "Ethan?" she called out, surprising herself. He stopped. "Yes. I'm sorry too, for all of this. I know you didn't want this marriage any more than I did." He looked at her for a long moment, something unreadable flickering in those storm cloud eyes. "Maybe that's the one thing we have in common." Then he was gone, and Lily stood in her sanctuary, wondering if she had just witnessed the first crack in his armor, or if she was fooling herself into seeing humanity where none existed. The Ashford Gala was Savannah's premier social event, a night when old money and new wealth mingled in a grand ballroom, pretending they didn't despise each other. For Lily and Ethan, it was their first public appearance as Mr. and Mrs. Harrison, and the pressure was suffocating. Lily stood in her dressing room, staring at the gown her mother-in-law had sent over, a stunning navy blue creation that probably cost more than her old car. Elena Harrison had included a note. "Wear this. Represent us well." Not a suggestion. Command. Ethan knocked once before entering, a courtesy he hadn't extended before. He wore a black tuxedo that made him look like he'd stepped out of a magazine spread. Powerful, untouchable, perfect. His eyes swept over her, assessing. "You look acceptable," he said, which was apparently Harrison speak for a compliment. "You look like every other rich man in Savannah," she countered. "Boring and expensive." His jaw tightened. Good. She'd gotten under his skin, but he didn't rise to the bait. "The car is waiting. We need to leave in 5 minutes. And Lily," he stepped closer, his voice dropping to something dangerous. "Tonight we play the part. Smile. Touch my arm occasionally. Laugh at my jokes. Make them believe we're happy. Can you do that? Can you?" She shot back. They stared at each other, two actors preparing for the performance of their lives. "I've been pretending my entire life," Ethan said softly. "This is just another role." Something in his tone made Lily pause. A glimpse of pain. He quickly shuddered. But then his mask was back in place, and he was offering his arm like a gentleman. "Shall we?" They rode to the gala in silence, the city lights of Savannah flickering past the limousine windows. Lily could feel tension radiating from Ethan, could see his hand clenching and unclenching on his knee. He was nervous. The realization surprised her. He was always so controlled, so perfectly composed. But tonight, apparently, even ice could crack. The Ashford estate blazed with light, the driveway lined with luxury cars and uniformed valets. As their limousine pulled up, Lily could see people gathering on the front steps, waiting to get a glimpse of the newlyweds. "Ready?" Ethan asked. "No," she admitted. "Me neither." He took her hand, the first time he'd touched her voluntarily since their wedding day, and squeezed it once. "Then we pretend together." The door opened, and they stepped out into the flash of cameras and the weight of 100 judging eyes, wearing matching smiles that hid matching terror. Inside, the ballroom was a wonderland of crystal and candlelight, of women in designer gowns and men in tailored suits, of whispered gossip and champagne toasts. Everywhere Lily and Ethan went, conversations stopped. People stared. Their fathers materialized like sharks sensing blood. "You're late," Alexander Harrison said to Ethan, his smile not reaching his eyes. Richard Caldwell appeared beside him, assessing Lily with the same coldness. "You both look perfect. Remember, everyone is watching. Don't embarrass us." Then they were gone, circulating among the powerful, leaving their children to fend for themselves. "I hate them," Lily whispered. Ethan's hand found the small of her back, a gesture that looked intimate but felt like armor. "Get in line," he murmured back. And for the first time since their wedding day, they were united. Not in love, but in a shared enemy. Not in affection, but in mutual survival. As they moved through the crowd, playing their parts perfectly, something shifted. Maybe it was the way Ethan's hand stayed on her back, protective despite himself. Maybe it was how Lily laughed at his dry humor, surprising them both. Or maybe it was simply this. In a room full of predators, they had each other's backs. And that was something. Not much, but something. Margaret Sinclair was Savannah's most notorious socialite. 75 years old, sharp as a blade, wealthy enough to say whatever she wanted without consequence. She cornered Lily by the champagne fountain like a hawk spotting prey, her diamonds glittering in the candlelight, her smile all teeth and no warmth. "Mrs. Harrison," she purred. "How delightful to finally speak with you. Tell me, dear, how are you adjusting to married life?" It was a trap disguised as pleasantry, and they both knew it. "It's wonderful," Lily said, keeping her voice light. "Ethan is everything I could have hoped for." The lie tasted like ash, but she delivered it perfectly. Margaret's eyes gleamed with predatory amusement. "How romantic. Though I must say we were all surprised by the announcement. You and Ethan barely knew each other, did you? Some might call it impulsive." The unspoken accusation hung in the air. Arranged marriage. Lily felt her smile tighten, felt the urge to tell this woman exactly where she could shove her judgment. But Ethan had materialized beside her, his arm sliding around her waist with practiced ease. "Margaret," he said, his voice warm but his eyes cold. "Are you interrogating my wife?" Margaret laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Not at all, dear boy. Simply making conversation. You know how we old ladies love to gossip." "Then let me save you some time," Ethan said smoothly. "Yes, Lily and I married quickly. When you know. Isn't that right, darling?" He looked down at Lily with such convincing affection that for a moment, even she almost believed it. "Absolutely," she said, leaning into him. "Sometimes love doesn't follow a timeline." Margaret's expression soured slightly. She had been hoping for scandal, not sweetness. "Well, how modern of you both. I wish you all the happiness in the world." She drifted away, already searching for her next victim, and Lily felt Ethan's arm drop from her waist like he'd been burned. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for the rescue." He straightened his cufflinks, not meeting her eyes. "It benefits neither of us if people suspect the truth. We're in this together, whether we like it or not." The moment of unity dissolved as quickly as it had formed. They were allies of necessity, nothing more. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of forced conversations and fake smiles. Lily met what felt like hundreds of people. Business partners of the Harrisons, old friends of the Caldwells, society women who assessed her like merchandise, men who looked at Ethan with envy for landing the artist daughter of Richard Caldwell. By the time they finally escaped to the limousine, Lily's face hurt from smiling, and Ethan looked ready to murder someone. They rode home in silence again, but this time it was different. Not hostile, just exhausted. Two soldiers after battle, too tired to fight anymore. "You did well tonight," Ethan said as the car turned into their estate. Lily looked at him, surprised. "So did you. Very convincing. Pretending to adore me." "Who says I was pretending?" The words came out before he could stop them, and they both froze. Lily searched his face, looking for the joke, the sarcasm. But his expression was carefully blank, revealing nothing. "What do you mean?" she asked carefully. Ethan opened the car door, stepping out into the night. "I mean, we made them believe it. That's all that matters." He walked toward the house without waiting for her, leaving Lily sitting in the limousine, her heart beating strangely fast, wondering if she had just imagined the vulnerability in his voice, or if Ethan Harrison was becoming something more complicated than the enemy she needed him to be. Lily couldn't sleep. She lay in her enormous bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the gala over and over. The way Ethan's hand had felt on her back. The way he'd defended her against Margaret's interrogation. The strange, unguarded moment in the car. Who says I was pretending? It didn't mean anything. Couldn't. He had made it clear from the beginning that this marriage was business, that emotions had no place between them. So why couldn't she stop thinking about him? At 2 a.m., she gave up on sleep and padded downstairs to the kitchen, hoping to find tea or warm milk or anything to quiet her racing mind. The house was dark and silent. All the servants retired for the night. She moved through the hallways in her pajamas and bare feet, feeling like a ghost haunting her own life. The kitchen was massive and modern, all stainless steel and marble countertops. She found a kettle and was searching for tea when a voice from the doorway made her jump. "Can't sleep either?" Ethan stood in the shadows, wearing sweatpants and a t-shirt, his hair disheveled, looking more human than she'd ever seen him. "You scared me," Lily said, her hand over her racing heart. "Sorry. I heard someone moving around." He stepped into the kitchen, and in the dim light, she could see exhaustion etched into his face. "I was making tea. Want some?" The offer felt strange and domestic, like something a real wife would say to a real husband. Ethan hesitated, then nodded. "Sure." They moved around each other carefully in the kitchen, two strangers learning a choreography. Lily found mugs and tea bags while Ethan retrieved milk from the refrigerator. The kettle whistled, breaking the silence. They sat at the kitchen island, cradling their mugs, not looking at each other. "Why can't you sleep?" Ethan asked finally. Lily considered lying, then decided she was too tired for pretense. "I keep thinking about tonight, about what you said in the car." His hands tightened around his mug. "Forget I said that. I was tired." Was it true? She didn't know why she was pushing, why this suddenly mattered. Maybe because for the first time she had seen a crack in his armor, and she needed to know if there was actually a person underneath. "Does it matter?" Ethan asked, his voice rough. "We're stuck in this marriage either way. Whether I can tolerate you or hate you doesn't change the fundamental reality." "It matters to me," Lily said quietly. "Because if we're going to survive this, I need to know if there's any possibility of not hating each other every single day." Ethan looked at her then, really looked at her, and she saw something raw in his eyes. "I don't hate you, Lily. I hate what was done to us. I hate that I didn't have a choice. I hate that every time I look at you, I'm reminded that my life isn't my own." He paused, his voice dropping to barely a whisper. "But I don't hate you." The confession hung between them like something fragile and dangerous. Lily felt her throat tighten with unexpected emotion. "I don't hate you either," she admitted. "I want to. It would be easier if I did. But you're just as trapped as I am, aren't you?" Ethan laughed bitterly. "We're both prisoners pretending to be royalty." They sat in silence, drinking their tea, and for the first time since their wedding, the quiet between them wasn't hostile. It was almost peaceful, understanding, two inmates acknowledging their shared cell. "What did you want?" Lily asked suddenly. "Before all this, what did you dream about?" Ethan looked surprised by the question, like no one had ever asked him before. "I don't know," he said slowly. "I was never allowed to want anything except what my father wanted for me. By the time I was old enough to have my own dreams, I'd forgotten how." The sadness in his voice broke something in Lily's chest. She had been so focused on her own pain that she hadn't considered his. "That's the saddest thing I've ever heard," she whispered. "What about you?" Ethan asked. "What did you want?" "Freedom," Lily said immediately. "I wanted to paint and travel and fall in love with someone who chose me because he couldn't imagine his life without me. Not because a contract said he had to." She laughed sadly. "I wanted what every girl wants, I guess. A love story, not a business transaction." They looked at each other across the kitchen island, two people who should have been strangers but now shared the most intimate prison imaginable. "I'm sorry," Ethan said suddenly, "for being cold, for pushing you away. I thought it would be easier if we stayed enemies. But after tonight, watching you handle Margaret and the others, seeing you smile through all that judgment. You were brave. And I was an ass. Lily felt tears prick her eyes. You weren't an ass. You were protecting yourself. I understand that now. Ethan reached across the counter, his hand stopping just short of hers. An invitation, not a demand. Lily stared at his hand, at the vulnerability in the gesture, and slowly placed her hand in his. His fingers closed around hers, warm and solid, and neither of them moved. They sat like that for a long moment, two people holding on in the darkness, not lovers but not enemies either. Something new, something undefined, something that scared them both. We should try, Ethan said finally, to be civil, to be friends, maybe. It doesn't have to be miserable every day. Friends, Lily repeated, testing the word. I can try that. They finished their tea in companionable silence, then walked upstairs together, stopping at the point where the hallway split. East wing and west wing, her prison and his. Good night, Lily, Ethan said. Good night, Ethan. As she walked to her room, Lily felt something dangerous blooming in her chest. Not love, it was far too soon for that. But hope. Fragile, terrifying hope that maybe, just maybe, this marriage wouldn't destroy her after all. She had no idea how wrong she was. Hope, she would learn, could be the most dangerous thing of all. Morning came gentler than before. Lily woke to sunlight filtering through her curtains. And for the first time since moving into the Harrison estate, she didn't feel immediate dread. Last night's conversation with Ethan had shifted something fundamental. They had seen each other's humanity, acknowledged their shared suffering. It wasn't love, but it was a ceasefire. And in a war, even a brief peace felt like a gift. She dressed carefully, choosing a simple sundress instead of her usual armor of jeans and defiance. If they were going to try being civil, maybe she could meet him halfway. When she entered the dining room, Ethan was already there. But this time he looked up from his newspaper. Good morning, he said, and his voice had lost some of its Arctic edge. Morning, Lily replied, taking a seat. Not at the far end of the table this time, but in the middle, closer. A small gesture that spoke volumes. Ethan noticed. His eyes flickered to her new position, and something that might have been a smile ghosted across his lips before disappearing. They ate breakfast in a silence that was almost comfortable, broken only by the clink of silverware and the rustle of newspaper pages. Then Ethan folded his paper and did something unexpected. He looked at her with genuine interest. How's your studio working out? Are you painting? The question caught Lily off guard. He was asking about her life, her passion, as if he actually cared. It's perfect, she said, unable to hide her enthusiasm. The light is incredible. I've been working on a series about women in cages, golden cages, beautiful prisons. It's therapeutic. She stopped, suddenly self-conscious. Sorry, you probably don't care about my art. I do, actually. Ethan set his coffee down, his attention fully on her. Tell me about it. What are you trying to say with the series? Lily studied him, looking for sarcasm or obligation, but found neither. He genuinely wanted to know, so she told him. About the women she was painting, trapped in elaborate cages made of gold and silk, about how beauty and imprisonment weren't opposites but often companions, about how she was trying to capture the feeling of being on display while dying inside. As she spoke, passion animated her features, her hands moving to illustrate her vision, and Ethan found himself genuinely captivated. I'd like to see them, he said when she finished. The paintings, if you don't mind. Lily blinked in surprise. Really? Really? He stood, checking his watch. I have meetings until 5, but maybe after dinner? It was an invitation, a bridge being built between their separate wings. Okay. Lily agreed, her heart doing something strange in her chest. After dinner. Ethan nodded, then hesitated at the door. Lily? Thank you. For last night. For talking to me like I'm human. Thank you for being human, she replied softly. After he left, Lily sat alone in the dining room, staring at her half-eaten breakfast, trying to understand what was happening. They had made a truce. They were trying. And the most terrifying part was that she wanted it to work. She wanted to know more about the man behind the ice, wanted to understand what dreams he'd buried beneath duty and expectation. This was dangerous territory. Caring about Ethan Harrison could only lead to more pain. But as she walked to her studio, Lily couldn't deny the small flame of warmth that had ignited in her chest. For the first time since their wedding, she wasn't completely miserable. And that small shift felt like a revolution. Dinner that evening was different. They sat closer, spoke more, shared small observations about their days that didn't feel forced. Ethan told her about a difficult client who insisted on restructuring a deal at the last minute. Lily described her frustration with a painting that refused to capture the emotion she wanted. They were learning each other's rhythms, discovering the small details that made up a life. It felt dangerous and necessary all at once. When dinner ended, Ethan stood and offered his hand. "Ready to show me your work?" Lily took his hand, feeling the warmth of his palm against hers, and led him through the mansion to the conservatory. Night had fallen, and the glass room glowed with soft lamplight, her canvases arranged around the space like sentinels. She watched nervously as Ethan moved from painting to painting, his expression unreadable, his eyes taking in every brushstroke, every choice of color and composition. The paintings were raw and honest. Women in elaborate cages of gold and jewels, their faces showing everything from rage to resignation to quiet despair. Some reached through the bars toward freedom. Others sat in corners, broken. One woman was painting the walls of her cage in beautiful colors, making art from her prison. That one, Ethan stood in front of the longest. "This one," he said quietly. "Is this you?" Lily came to stand beside him, looking at the woman in the painting who had transformed her cage into a canvas. "Maybe. I'm still figuring out who I am in all this." Ethan turned to face her, and the intensity in his eyes made her breath catch. "These are extraordinary, Lily. They're not just technically brilliant, though they're emotionally devastating. You've captured something true about what it means to be trapped by beauty, by privilege, by expectation." He paused, his voice dropping. "By family." She understood then. He saw himself in these paintings too. He was as caged as she was, just with different bars. "I didn't know you understood art," Lily said, trying to lighten the moment. "I don't," Ethan admitted. "But I understand pain when I see it." They stood together in the lamplight, surrounded by Lily's imprisoned women, and something shifted in the space between them. Ethan reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. The gesture was tender, intimate, nothing like the cold businessman who had married her out of duty. "You have real talent," he said softly. "Don't let this marriage kill it. Keep painting. Keep fighting. Don't let them make you forget who you are." "Who are you?" Lily whispered, searching his face. "When you're not being the Harrison heir. Who is Ethan underneath all that armor?" For a moment, she thought he might actually answer, might let her see the real man hidden beneath layers of family expectation and self-protection. But then his phone buzzed, shattering the moment like dropped glass. He checked the screen and his expression hardened. "My father. He wants to see us tomorrow for brunch at his estate. Both of us." The warmth between them cooled instantly. Reality crashed back in. They weren't just Lily and Ethan, two people discovering each other. They were pawns in a game played by men who valued power over happiness. "We have to go?" Lily asked, though she already knew the answer. "We have to go," Ethan confirmed, his voice resigned. "And we have to play the perfect couple. Happy. United. Everything they want us to be." He looked at her paintings again, at all those caged women, and something like guilt crossed his face. "I'm sorry for bringing you into this world. You didn't have a choice either," Lily reminded him. They stood in the conservatory for a moment longer, two people caught between who they wanted to be and who they were forced to become. Then Ethan left, and Lily was alone with her paintings, with her caged women who understood all too well what it meant to be beautiful and broken at the same time. She picked up her brush and began a new canvas. Two figures in separate cages, reaching toward each other across an impossible distance. She didn't know if it was hopeful or tragic. Maybe it was both. Alexander Harrison's estate made Ethan's mansion look modest by comparison. It was a monument to wealth and power. Columned entrance, sprawling grounds, interior designed to intimidate and impress in equal measure. As Lily and Ethan's car pulled up the circular drive, she felt her stomach clench with anxiety. This was the man who had orchestrated their marriage, who had looked at his son and seen only a chess piece to be moved. She already hated him. "Remember," Ethan said quietly as the valet opened Lily's door, "they're watching for cracks. Don't give them any." He took her hand as they walked to the entrance, and Lily tried to draw strength from his touch. They were playing a part, pretending to be a united front. But as they stepped into the marble foyer, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were lambs walking into a lion's den. Alexander and Elena Harrison waited in the formal sitting room, along with Lily's parents, Richard and Margaret Caldwell. All four parental figures sat like judges at a tribunal, assessing, evaluating, searching for weakness. Ethan, Lily, Alexander stood, tall and silver-haired and radiating authority. "Thank you for coming on short notice. Please sit." It wasn't a request. They sat on a velvet settee, Ethan's hand still holding Lily's, both of them acutely aware of four sets of eyes watching their every movement. "We wanted to check in," Richard Caldwell said, his voice deceptively pleasant. "Make sure the transition is going smoothly. Marriage is an adjustment, especially arranged as quickly as yours was." The word arranged hung in the air like an accusation they were all pretending not to hear. "Everything is fine," Ethan said smoothly. "Lily is settling into the estate beautifully. We're very happy." Lily forced a smile that felt like cracking glass. "Very happy," she echoed. Elena Harrison, who had been silent until now, leaned forward. She was an elegant woman, perfectly coiffed and dressed, but her eyes held a coldness that rivaled her husband's. "We hear you've been painting again, Lily. How quaint. Of course, we hope you'll balance your little hobby with your duties as Mrs. Harrison. There will be charity galas, board meetings, society functions. The Harrison women have always been very involved." Little hobby. The dismissal of her art, her passion, her identity, reduced to something cute and inconsequential. Lily felt rage building in her chest, felt the urge to tell this woman exactly what she thought of her and her precious Harrison legacy. But Ethan's hand tightened on hers, a silent warning. "Lily's art is extraordinary," Ethan said, his voice carrying an edge. "She's already completed several pieces for a series that galleries would pay handsomely for. We're very proud of her talent." The surprise in the room was palpable. Ethan Harrison defending his wife, actually praising her? This wasn't in the script. Alexander's eyes narrowed slightly. "How progressive of you, son. Though I hope this artistic pursuit doesn't distract from the real purpose of your marriage, strengthening our family's position and eventually producing heirs to carry on our legacy." The words landed like a slap. Producing heirs. As if Lily were livestock, valued only for her reproductive capacity. She felt sick. "We're taking things one step at a time," Ethan said carefully. "There's no rush." "Isn't there?" Richard Caldwell interjected. "You're 30, Ethan. Lily is 26. Time doesn't stand still. The whole point of this union was to merge our families completely. Children are the ultimate seal on that merger." Lily couldn't stay silent anymore. "I'm not a business transaction," she said, her voice shaking with suppressed fury. "And any children Ethan and I might have someday will be because we want them, not because you're demanding heirs like we're living in medieval times." The room went deadly silent. Margaret Caldwell gasped softly. Alexander's expression darkened. Richard looked ready to explode. But Ethan squeezed her hand and stood, pulling Lily up with him. "She's right," he said, his voice cold and final. "Our marriage, our timeline, our choices. We'll attend your functions and play our parts in public. But our private life is exactly that, private. Now if you'll excuse us, we have plans this afternoon." He walked toward the door, Lily's hand still in his, leaving four stunned parents in their wake. They made it to the car before either of them spoke, before the adrenaline started wearing off and reality set in. "Oh God," Lily breathed. "What did I just do?" "You stood up for yourself," Ethan said, and there was something like admiration in his voice. "You told them the truth. That took courage. They're going to punish us for this. You know that, right?" Ethan pulled out of the driveway, his jaw set. "Let them try. I'm tired of being their puppet." As they drove away from his father's estate, Lily realized something fundamental had shifted. They weren't just tolerating each other anymore. They were becoming allies, partners, maybe even friends. And that scared her almost as much as it thrilled her. Because the more she cared about Ethan Harrison, the more power this nightmare marriage had to completely destroy her. The fallout came swiftly. Within hours of their departure from Alexander's estate, both Lily and Ethan received messages. Terse, angry, threatening. Alexander summoned Ethan to his office Monday morning. Richard demanded Lily come home for a discussion. Elena called repeatedly, leaving voicemails about disappointment and family duty. The pressure was immediate and overwhelming, designed to break them, to remind them who held the real power. That evening, Lily found Ethan in his study, a room she had never entered before. It was surprisingly personal. Bookshelves lined with classics and modern literature, a chess set mid-game against himself, windows overlooking the garden. He sat at his desk, a glass of whiskey in hand, staring at nothing. "Can I come in?" she asked from the doorway. He looked up, and the exhaustion in his eyes broke her heart. "It's your house too." She entered, closing the door behind her, and sat in the chair across from his desk. For a long moment, they just looked at each other, two people who had declared war on their families and now faced the consequences together. "My father threatened to remove me from the company," Ethan said finally. "Said if I can't control my wife and produce heirs on his timeline, he'll give my position to my cousin Marcus. Everything I've worked for, gone because we dared to set boundaries." The pain in his voice was raw. This wasn't just about power or money. It was about his identity, his purpose, everything he'd been raised to believe gave his life meaning. "I'm sorry," Lily whispered. "This is my fault. I shouldn't have said anything." "No." Ethan's voice was fierce. "You were right to speak up. They treat us like possessions, like we don't have thoughts or feelings that matter. I'm glad you said it, even if there are consequences." He stood and moved to the window, his back to her, shoulders tense with anger and stress. "I've spent my entire life doing what they wanted. Went to the right schools, pursued the right career, married the right woman, no offense." "None taken," Lily said softly. "I'm not offended by the truth." Ethan turned to face her, and in the lamplight, he looked younger somehow, vulnerable in a way she'd never seen. "What if we just left?" he asked suddenly. "What if we took what money we have, got on a plane, and disappeared? Started over somewhere they couldn't find us?" The fantasy was tempting: freedom, escape, a life built on their own terms. But Lily knew it was impossible. "They'd find us," she said gently. "Men like our fathers don't accept defeat. They'd hunt us down, destroy our reputations, make sure we could never work or live in peace. And we'd be looking over our shoulders forever." Ethan nodded, the dream dying in his eyes. "I know. But for a moment, it was nice to imagine." He returned to his desk, poured another whiskey, and offered her the glass. She took it, their fingers brushing, and drank. The alcohol burned, warming her from the inside. "So what do we do?" Lily asked. "We survive," Ethan said. "We go to my father's office tomorrow. We apologize, not because we mean it, but because it's tactical. We play their game just well enough to keep them off our backs while we figure out our next move." He looked at her intently. "But here, in private, we don't let them win. We stay human. We stay." He paused, searching for the word, us. The word felt significant, like they had become a unit somehow, a team separate from their families. "Us," Lily agreed, and she meant it. "I can do that if you can." They stayed in his study for hours, talking about everything and nothing. Books they'd read, places they wanted to travel, childhood memories that revealed the people they'd been before duty and expectation reshaped them. Lily learned that Ethan had wanted to be a teacher once, that he loved chess because it was the only place where strategy felt like art, that he'd been in love once with a girl his father deemed unsuitable and had been forced to end it. Ethan learned that Lily had a scar on her knee from falling out of a tree at 8, that she'd applied to art school in Paris but her father had forbidden her from going, that she'd never had a serious boyfriend because no one in Savannah's elite circles understood her passion for painting. As midnight approached, they walked upstairs together, and this time when they reached the split in the hallway, Ethan pulled her into a hug, brief, warm, unexpected. "We'll get through this," he murmured against her hair. "Whatever happens, we face it together." Lily held on to him for a moment longer than necessary, breathing in his cologne, feeling his heartbeat through his shirt, and realized with startling clarity that she was in terrible danger. Not from their families, though they were threat enough, but from the way her heart raced when he was near, from the way she caught herself thinking about him during the day, from the way his smile made something in her chest ache with longing. She was falling for her husband, the man she was forced to marry, the man she was supposed to hate, and that, she knew, would destroy her more completely than any family feud ever could. Monday morning arrived with gray skies and the weight of an impending execution. Ethan dressed in his most expensive suit, armor for the battle ahead. Lily wore a conservative dress her mother would approve of, costume for the performance they had to give. They drove to Harrison Industries in silence, each lost in their own thoughts, preparing to humble themselves before a man they were both beginning to hate. Alexander's office occupied the entire top floor of a glass tower that bore his name. As Lily and Ethan stepped off the elevator, his assistant, a woman who looked like she'd never smiled in her life, gestured them toward the double doors. "He's expecting you." The tone suggested they were already in trouble. Alexander sat behind a desk the size of a small car, backlit by floor-to-ceiling windows that made him look like a silhouette, a shadow king passing judgment. "Sit," he commanded, and they obeyed. For several long moments he said nothing, just studied them with eyes that missed nothing. "Do you know what you've done?" he finally asked, his voice deadly quiet. "You embarrassed me in my own home. You defied explicit instructions about your role in this family. And worst of all, you showed weakness, making it clear that this marriage is not the united front we need it to be." He leaned forward, his face emerging from shadow. "I will not tolerate disobedience. Not from you, Ethan, and certainly not from your mouthy little wife." Lily felt rage ignite in her chest, but Ethan's hand found hers under the armrest, squeezing a warning. They had agreed to play the game. To survive, they had to submit, at least for now. "We apologize, Father," Ethan said, and Lily marveled at how he could make his voice sound sincere while his eyes remained flat and cold. "We were overwhelmed by the pressure and reacted poorly. It won't happen again." Alexander's gaze shifted to Lily. "And you? Do you apologize for your disrespect?" Every fiber of her being wanted to tell him exactly where he could shove his apology. But she thought of Ethan losing everything he'd worked for, of both of them being crushed under the weight of their father's wrath, and she forced the words out. "I apologize. I spoke out of turn. I'll be more mindful of my position in the future." The lie tasted like poison, but Alexander seemed satisfied. He leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. "Good. Then let me be clear about expectations going forward. You will attend every social function as a couple. You will present a united, happy front at all times. Lily, you will tone down the artistic nonsense and focus on charity work appropriate for a Harrison wife. And both of you will begin seriously discussing children. We want an announcement within the year." Lily felt sick. An announcement within the year meant they expected her to be pregnant soon, expected her to bring a child into this nightmare, to trap herself even more completely in this gilded cage. "We understand," Ethan said before Lily could respond. "Is there anything else?" Alexander stood, dismissing them like servants. "Just remember, you exist because I allow it. Your comfortable life, your money, your position in society, all of it comes from me. Cross me again and I'll take it all away. You'll have nothing. You'll be nothing." He smiled then, cold and cruel. Now get out of my office. They left in silence, rode the elevator down 40 floors without speaking, climbed into the car and drove away from the glass tower that symbolized everything wrong with their lives. Only when they were safely away did Ethan pull over into a parking garage, put the car in park, and let out a roar of frustration that echoed off concrete walls. He slammed his hands against the steering wheel, once, twice, his composure finally shattering. "I hate him," he said, his voice raw. "God, I hate him so much." Lily reached over and took his face in her hands, forcing him to look at her. "Then we beat him," she said fiercely. "Not today. Not by confrontation. But we find a way to beat him. We get out from under his control. We find our freedom." "How?" Ethan asked, and he sounded so lost, so broken, that Lily wanted to hold him and never let go. "I don't know yet," she admitted. "But we're smart. We're resourceful. And we have something he doesn't understand. We actually care about each other." The words came out before she could stop them, a confession neither of them was ready for. Ethan stared at her, his gray eyes searching her face. "Do we?" he asked quietly. "Care about each other?" Lily's heart hammered in her chest. This was dangerous territory, admitting feelings in a marriage built on hate. But she couldn't lie. Not anymore. "I do," she whispered. "I care about you, Ethan. I don't know when it happened, but it did. You're not my enemy anymore. You're—" She paused, searching for the right word. "You're mine to protect, just like I'm yours." Ethan pulled her into his arms then, holding her tightly in the front seat of the car. In a parking garage, in the middle of a nightmare they couldn't escape. "You're mine to protect too," he murmured against her hair. "And I swear to God, Lily, I will find a way to get us out of this. I don't know how yet, but I promise you, we won't be their puppets forever." They held each other while the world rushed by outside. Two people who had been forced together by hate but were choosing to stay together by something that felt dangerously close to love. And neither of them realized that this choice, this moment of connection, would be exactly what their families feared most, and exactly what would ultimately destroy them both. Something changed after that day in the parking garage. The walls between Lily and Ethan's separate wings began to crumble. She started finding him in the conservatory, watching her paint, asking questions about technique and vision. He invited her to his study for evening chess games, teaching her strategy while they talked about everything except their marriage. They ate breakfast together every morning, dinner together every evening, and slowly, without permission from their families or logic, they became friends. And then something more. It was the small things that betrayed them. The way Ethan's eyes followed Lily across a room. The way her smile brightened when he came home from work. The accidental touches that lingered too long. His hand on her back, her fingers brushing his arm. They were crossing lines, breaking rules they hadn't even acknowledged existed. And everyone around them noticed. The staff whispered. Their families watched with growing suspicion. This wasn't supposed to happen. Arranged marriages were meant to be cordial at best, tolerable at worst. But genuine affection? That was dangerous. One evening, after a particularly long day of charity meetings Elena had insisted Lily attend, she returned home exhausted and frustrated. Ethan found her in the conservatory, staring at a blank canvas, her shoulders tight with tension. "Rough day?" he asked gently. "Your mother," Lily said bitterly. "She spent 6 hours telling me everything I'm doing wrong as a Harrison wife. My clothes are too casual. My opinions are too strong. I smile at servants too much, apparently. God forbid I treat them like human beings." She turned to face him, tears of frustration in her eyes. "Is this what my life is now? Being reshaped into some perfect society wife who has no thoughts of her own?" Ethan crossed the room and pulled her into his arms without hesitation, without the careful distance they usually maintained. She melted against him, breathing in his scent, feeling his strength surround her. "You don't have to change," he murmured. "Not for them. Not for anyone. Stay exactly who you are. Strong, passionate, infuriatingly independent. That's who I..." He paused, and she felt his heart racing beneath her cheek. That's who I've come to care about. The real Lily, not some manufactured version my mother wants. She pulled back just enough to look up at him. Ethan, we need to be careful. We're getting too close. If they realize we actually... She couldn't finish the sentence, couldn't say the word that terrified her. Actually what? He asked, his voice rough. Actually care about each other? Actually enjoy being married? Why is that a problem? Isn't that what they wanted? A united front? No, Lily said sadly. They wanted obedience. They wanted us bound by contract and mutual obligation. But genuine feeling? Genuine connection? That's something they can't control. And your father, our fathers, they hate anything they can't control. Ethan's jaw tightened. I don't care anymore. Let them watch. Let them worry. For the first time in my life, I'm choosing something for myself. And I choose this. I choose you. The confession hung between them, dangerous and beautiful and terrifying. Lily knew she should pull away, should protect them both from the inevitable fallout. But she was tired of being careful, tired of denying what was growing between them. I choose you too, she whispered. Ethan's hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing her cheekbone. Can I kiss you? He asked, and the question was so tender, so full of genuine wanting rather than obligation, that Lily's heart broke and healed in the same moment. Yes, she breathed. He kissed her softly, carefully, like she was something precious that might break. It was nothing like their wedding kiss, cold and performative. This was real. This was a choice they were both making with clear eyes and full hearts. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, Lily saw something in Ethan's eyes that made her stomach drop. Love, genuine and undeniable and completely forbidden, because that's what they had stumbled into without meaning to. Love. In a marriage built on hate, they had found the most dangerous thing possible. We're in trouble, aren't we? Lily whispered. Ethan pulled her close again, resting his chin on top of her head. The worst kind, he agreed. But I don't care anymore. I'm tired of living. For their approval. For the first time in 30 years, I'm happy. And if that makes us rebels, so be it. They stood together in the conservatory, surrounded by paintings of caged women, and made a silent pact. They would fight for this, for whatever was growing between them. They would fight for the right to love each other in a marriage that was never supposed to include love at all. They had no idea that by choosing each other, they had just signed their own death warrant. Because men like Alexander Harrison and Richard Caldwell didn't just control their children's marriages. They controlled everything. And they were about to remind Lily and Ethan exactly how much power they held, and how far they would go to maintain it. For 3 months, Lily and Ethan existed in a bubble of stolen happiness. They became inseparable. Morning runs through the estate gardens, long dinners where they talked until midnight, weekend trips to the beach where they could pretend to be a normal couple unburdened by family legacy. Ethan watched Lily paint for hours, fascinated by the way her hands moved, the way she lost herself in creation. Lily learned about Ethan's work, understanding for the first time the weight he carried running an empire he'd never wanted. They made love for the first time on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, and it was nothing like the clinical duty both had expected. It was tender and passionate and real, a joining of two souls who had found each other in the most unlikely circumstances. They were careful to maintain appearances at family functions, playing the roles of dutiful children and cordial spouses. But in private, they were falling deeper into something neither could control. Lily had never been in love before. Not like this, not with someone who knew all her broken pieces and loved her anyway. Ethan had loved once in college, but it was nothing compared to this. This all-consuming need to be near her, to make her laugh, to protect her from a world that wanted to mold her into something she wasn't. They were happy, dangerously, completely, recklessly happy. But happiness, they would learn, was a luxury their families couldn't afford to let them keep. The trouble began with whispers. Staff members at the Harrison estate talking about how much time the couple spent together, how true love cannot be forced, but it can grow in the most unexpected places, even in cages built by hate, pride, and family expectations. While duty and tradition may try to control our lives, the heart has its own rules. Courage, patience, and honesty can turn even a prison into a space where love blossoms. And sometimes the greatest strength is knowing when to fight for love and when to let it go.